Hey guys, Steve here, and last time we completed a versus battle with Weepin' Bell and Victory Bell. Today's video will be another special battle between two of Koga's ace Pokemon. These Pokemon being Muk and Weezing.
Weezing smokescreen attack!
These two Pokemon do not see a lot of play, probably for a multitude of reasons. But the biggest reason is probably why a lot of Pokemon don't see a lot of play. They're hidden very late in the game, when your team is already established and you probably don't have a lot of room left on the team. The Pokemon Mansion is pretty far in the game, but up until this point your only encounter with either of them is with Koga, and all he does is spam minimize with Muk and self-destruct with Weezing. So you don't get an opportunity to see what it looks like when these Pokemon are used to their full potential. Let's take a look at the stats on these Pokemon to get a good idea of what to expect from this run. Weezing has a very average HP stat of 65, but Muk supports the 9th highest HP total in the entire game at 105. As for attack, Weezing is sporting a very balanced 90 attack and 85 special, while Muk is a lopsided 105 attack and 65 special. So it's clear that Weezing is going to be able to attack effectively with any move, while Muk is most effective with physical moves. But this isn't as bad of a hindrance as one would expect, but more on that when we get to its moves. With 120 defense and 85 special, Weezing will be able to make use of its lower overall HP than Muk will be able to. But that's to be expected. If there's anything you know about Weezing before going into this fight, is that it's particularly bulky, allowing for it to take quite a few hits before being able to use self-destruct. Now, possibly the most important factor is speed, and I cannot make this fact more known. You really want at least 60 speed in Kanto, which Weezing has. With only 50 speed, Muk is going to have to take a pounding from a lot of the faster Pokemon throughout the game, where Weezing is going to be able to get hit a lot less. Unlike Vaporeon, which had speed and HP, Muk has HP, but not speed. Now, being mono poison type, the weaknesses will be about the same, those being ground, psychic, and bug. To name some of the Pokemon that will have these moves that we'll run into are Giovanni's Dugtrio, that has dig, and there's lots of Kadabra, Drowsy, and Alakazams using psychic moves. Luckily, we don't need to worry about bug, as it's only going to be the occasional Zubat with Leech Life, and that power is next to nothing. Alright, as for the movesets, they're very similar, except a few minor changes. Weezing gets all of its good moves at the start of the game, and we have to pick up TMs throughout the game, while Muk gets absolutely terrible moveset for Brock, and we have a very limited amount of PP as well. Anyways, it does look like Weezing gets to look forward to picking up Thunderbolt and Fire Blast. I know Fire Blast is inaccurate, but when you have a very limited quantity of moves, you have to make do with what you got. But thankfully, the higher special will allow us the ability to use these moves for a solid amount of damage. Meanwhile, Muk gets pretty much the exact same moves, but we get access to one very important move: Body Slam. Body Slam was clutch for Victory Bell last week, and with 105 attack stat, should be very good for Muk too. As for my prediction of the winner, I would have to say it's going to be Weezing. Sludge is going to give it very early stab move that will be able to deal very solid damage and get through the early game very quickly. However, I do see how Muk is going to make a very strong comeback in the late game when it picks up both Sludge and Harden, but by then, it's probably going to be too late. Beating Brock with only Pound is going to be a pain, and that's going to set it back real far. The rules are going to be the same as they always are. They will be located in the description section of this video, or pause the screen if you'd like to see them. All 5 Easter eggs were located in the last video. This video will also have 5. Here are the comments that found the Easter eggs from the last video. Please try and guess in the comment section which Pokemon you think will win, and why. I've been having a blast replying back relatively spoiler-free in the comment section and hearing the perspectives that you guys have after laying out all of the facts. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to stay up to date on future videos. If you want to help this channel grow, please comment Sludge Bomb for the YouTube algorithm. First off, we're going to start the game by grabbing our level 5 Weezing and replacing Bulbasaur with the Universal Pokemon Randomizer to make sure that Champ has a Charizard. I give it the nickname Weez, because that's what it says in the anime, and it sounds like they're in perpetual torture. None of the starters were going to be particularly a challenge, but I figured Charizard was fast, and it would make a better comparison to my other poison Pokemon runs. Now, one of the things that I like to do whenever I have a high base power move like Sludge is consider taking a chance at the Champ 1A battle. And the reason why I don't do it with more Pokemon is because his Pokemon are level 9 and 8. That means that we're not going to be able to win very easily at level 5 or 6. So we need a high power move, or at least we need a sleep inducing move. For this battle in particular, he uses a lot of Sand Attack and Growl, which is fine for Weezing because even though Sludge's power is going to be reduced thanks to Growl, we do induce poison at a 50% chance, so it's not too bad. Now even with a move like Sludge, I already know there's no way I'm going to beat Brock on my first try. So I get a few more levels and then I decide, let's go ahead and see just how low we can beat Brock. So I go in at my first attempt at level 11. Now, after my first attack at Sludge, I realize I'm doing 2 damage. And then I take a look at my overlay and realize that my attack is only 24 power. Now, I expected to be resisted. I did not expect to be double resisted. So this attempt, I just go ahead and use all my PP, see how it goes, and it doesn't go very well. Now, it goes well enough that I think I could probably come back every single level until I finally win. So that's what I do. The next damage rounding threshold is going to be level 13, so I come back at level 13 to see how that goes. Well, it turns out that level 13 is not all that much better, because, well, increased damage when you do such a low amount of damage is not going to make much of a difference. However, one thing I did realize is that Sludge does have a pretty good chance of giving poison damage, and one thing that's really good against Brock's rocks is poison damage, because that's consistent damage every turn. However, you may realize that he has 5 full heals for every single Pokemon, aka 10 full heals. But if I can get the right amount of luck, there's a chance that I could win this just on poison damage alone. Now, the first try doesn't really go as planned, as we don't get poisoned very often and he does quite a lot of damage. If things go just a little bit better, as in Geodude doesn't use nearly as many tackles, and Onix doesn't use nearly as many bides or tackles, there's a good chance I could win this. However, the next attempt goes even poorer, so I realize that there's a chance I just need to come back at a higher level and do this again. There's nothing special about level 14 in particular. However, I go in just in case, because there's a good chance that his tackles are going to do less damage because our defense is so incredibly high, and that's exactly what happens. So I go into Onix at significantly higher amount of attack, and I have a decent amount of sludges, so I get a chance to use enough sludges so that the poison eventually sticks, and I can just go ahead and use Tackle, which does slightly more damage than Smog, and get the win. Now that we've beaten Brock, let's go ahead and check in on Muk, as we're going to start the game by grabbing our level 5 Muk and replacing Bulbasaur with the Universal Pokemon Randomizer to make sure that Champ has a Charizard. I give it the nickname Gloop, because it's a big pile of gloop. Muk's starting moveset is a little bit less than desirable, and honestly, this one's going to be a little bit weird, as we're going to have significantly more HP to work with, but our moveset is significantly worse. With that being said, I then decide to fight the Champ 1A battle anyways, just in case, to see if our higher amount of HP would make all the difference. However, it turns out that Pound is not a very good move, which allows our opponent to have more turns to be able to use Sand Attack, and it just does not work out in the end, even though we have a lot more HP to work with. This then brings us to the weird impasse known as Brock, as we only have Pound to work with. Therefore, Brock is going to be quite the hurdle, especially since we're not going to unlock a new move for quite some time. I have to just gauge Brock and see how we're going to do. The question is, what level do we decide to do this? I decide that level 13 should probably be good enough to give us a good idea on where we're going to be. During the 8 minutes of training between the rival and Brock, I was able to think about how the Weezing run had gone. Because I did the Muk run second, I was able to realize that I could actually just win by poison damage. Yes, I don't have Smog or Sludge, but we do have another move that does poison, and Poison Gas is 55% accurate, which is basically the same chance that Smog and Sludge were going to have to poison Geodude anyways, therefore allowing us the same strategy that we used for Weezing. And because we had more HP to work with, we were able to outlast the Geodude. bringing us to Onyx, and then for Onyx we're just going to go ahead and use all of our poison gases until the poison finally sticks. Once the poison is stuck, all we really have to do is outlast the Onyx. We just need to pay attention to Brock's moves. If he uses Bide, we go with Disable, because Disable is not going to do any damage, and actually Disable has a chance of disabling Bide, giving us extra turns to work with that don't count toward the Bide counter. In the end, it still is a bit of luck, because if he uses Tackle, we are a goner. We do take a lot of screeches, but we get lucky and we get a first try victory against Brock. With Brock defeated, we can then take a look at the split, and as you can see, well, Weezing had a few resets, Muk only had one reset. And that's going to be a big difference because, well, relying on poison is slow. So Weezing's going to be starting with a 2 minute and 46 second deficit. But that's not too bad, as we can make up a lot of time in the late game. After all, we do have Sludge, and Sludge is going to make quick work of our opponents. Meanwhile, Muk has only got Pound. So we should be able to make up a lot of that time very quickly in all of the minor battles. We're going to go ahead and continue on with Muk. And as we made it through Mount Moon, I heard a strange sound. I made my way toward this sound. It's coming from the Helix fossil. It's saying, "Please like, subscribe, and comment Sludge Bomb." It sounds like Sound Logic, but I need to make my way towards Champ 2. If you haven't already guessed, I picked Sludge Bomb as today's comment of the day, because it's quite comical that both of our competitors don't get Sludge Bomb. Why, you may ask? Well, because Sludge Bomb hasn't been invented yet. That's right, the Ice Beam / Thunderbolt / Flamethrower has not been invented yet for poison types. That was introduced in Gen 2. As for Champ 2, you're going to get to see just how little our Pound attack is going to do. So, this is a great example of how I told you that Sludge is probably going to get Weezing some time back during this run. As you can tell, we're going to be making up a lot of ground, as Pound is just a slow move. And on top of that, we only have one damaging move, so we have to visit the Pokemon Center multiple times throughout this run. Now, I don't really know what to expect for the Misty battle, as we have a lot of HP, so I'm not too worried going into this battle. I'll get a good idea on just how we're going to do, but it's always good to go in and get an attempt in just to see how much damage we're going to take. And if the battle seems winnable, we'll just do it again. Like in this battle here, we almost win. But on the next attempt, we take a lot less critical hits from Starmie, so therefore we're able to get through this battle without too much difficulty, which is good because backtracking to go meet Misty is always a bad move. Now, as you can probably imagine, we're going to be coming up on Body Slam real soon, so that's going to be a major upgrade to Muk, as we have a big attack stat, and as you probably imagine, Body Slam is a major upgrade over Pound. And while examining our moveset, I realized we're going to run into some future difficulties, so I make sure to pick up Rest on the way there. And since we're not going to learn a new move for quite some time, I just teach Rest right away because, well, Disable was useless anyways. Which then takes us to Surge, who's not going to be too much of a difficulty again, because we have Body Slam, we have a very high attack stat, already have the badge boost. However, I do underestimate Surge and he gets us pretty low, but that's mostly because I started with low HP. Which brings us to the real reason why I taught Rest to begin with. Because the Exploding Hiker is always going to be a difficult battle if you don't have a move that's going to be useful. And guess what? We've got Body Slam and Pound. So that's not going to do much. Therefore, we're just going to spam Rest whenever capable and just hope we can tank all the self-destructs. And thanks to our high HP stat, we don't really even need to time up the rest because we can tank the self-destructs quite well. Now, as for Erika, I was expecting this to be a free win. As for most poison types, you usually don't take any damage because Victory Bell is going to use Poison Powder and so is Vileplume. However, this time I was actually quite surprised as she used Wrap with her Victory Bell, and then for her Vileplume she used Mega Drain, which is very surprising to me because I realized that it's actually the grass typing that made her pick those moves. Now, as for the vitamin that I'm going to be using during this run, I decided to go with Carbos, as that's usually a good first run vitamin, as usually you have no idea what to expect, and that way, on the second run, you can make up for those difficulties by changing which vitamin you're going to pick. Now, my last video took over an hour, so I have decided to cut Champ 4 from the run, so let's go ahead and move on. However, we don't make it very far, as we make it to the Chandler right after Champ 4, and then his Ghastly's managed to take me down after a bit of bad confusion luck. After finishing that battle with better luck, we then finish the rest of Pokemon Tower, Cycling Road, and the Safari Zone to find ourselves at the drowsy Kadabra guy right before Koga. Turns out that Kadabra is really strong, and a confusion takes us out. Now, as we go ahead and start out Koga, you'll probably have noticed we're at level 35 now, and Minimize is at level 33. I decided that even though Minimize was designed for the Pokemon, and it's really not against the rules since it's not double team, I decided that on the first run, I was going to go ahead and not use Minimize, just to see how it's going to do. However, on the second run, I will use it because it is part of the Pokemon's design and it is part of its moveset, so it isn't against the rules by any means. Maybe a bit of foreshadowing here, but Muk doesn't necessarily need Minimize, and Weezing could use the extra help. Meanwhile, Koga's Muk has no such rule set and therefore uses a ton of Minimizes to make sure that I'm not going to do a whole lot of damage to it. So now I'm forced to go ahead and use Rest, as I have to wait until I finally can manage to hit that Muk. Now, of course, Minimize isn't the entire reason why I couldn't hit it. I do have 4 smoke screens, as you can see the -4 by the HP. I put that there so that way it's a reminder to me and you how low our accuracy currently is. Luckily, our HP is pretty high and self-destruct did not take us out. With that win under our belt, let's go ahead and head back over to Weezing to see how it's going to do. Now, as we start the Champ 2 battle, you can see just how much more damage that Sludge attack is going to do. It's a lot more than Pound, so you get a good idea just how fast we're going to be able to make up ground here on Muk. And now, with the Misty battle, you can see once again, we're making up a lot of time. I know it was a critical hit there on Staryu, but as you can see, we're making it up with high damage, and our HP isn't too bad. We're not actually losing that much. And as we start Champ 3, you get an idea of just how much time we're going to make up. But now you gotta remember, Muk has got Body Slam, so all that time that we gain was a little bit short-lived. But who knows, it is the early game, and you can make or break a lot of runs in the early game. Like Surge here, who starts with his Voltorb, who obviously decides to use Sonic Boom. It's clearly best move, instead of using Tackle, which would have been much better for me. Now Pikachu obviously goes down at one Sludge, and then Raichu decides to use Thunderbolt, where the next Thunderbolt then crits and takes us out. On the next attempt though, things go a little bit better as he just uses an X speed and we take it out in 2 shots. Remember what I said about being cocky? Yeah, well, Muk was the second run, and I had a bit of foresight, because obviously I did the Weezing run first, and you can probably tell that I don't have Rest on my moveset. Every Pokemon pretty much learns Rest, and you can see it's there on the bottom right, but I didn't bother to pick it up. Oh no, I decided that, well, I have a really high amount of defense. What could possibly go wrong? I could just tank all these hits. But of course, I don't. Not once, not twice. No, not even 3 times. Yes, it took 4 attempts before I finally tanked that self-destruct. As we make it to Erika, we can then have a breather, as we know this one is going to be easy. As we already previously mentioned, it's not going to be a freebie like it usually is, but we've got pretty high defense, we resist her grass moves, and there's not much she can do. As for Weezing, we're going to make the same decision. We're going to go ahead and pick up 4 Carbos and then use them. Now, of course, it's not going to be a smooth run. We're going to run into issues with Drowsy Hypno Guy. But after those complications, we then move on to Koga, who we're going to go ahead and actually use Thunderbolt, because our display tells us that Thunderbolt is actually our strongest move. For Muk, we were able to use Body Slam, because Body Slam wasn't being resisted. However, Poison typing is being resisted, so we have to use Thunderbolt, which is a little bit of a surprise. But luckily, I didn't make this mistake, and we were able to move on, go ahead and make it to Weezing, and then take a self-destruct for the win. As our Pokemon once again catch up, we can then take a look at the splits, and as you can see, it looks like Weezing has finally caught back up. And actually, it's taken a slight lead, even though it's taken a few more resets. Now, the movesets for both Pokemon are actually very similar at this point. They both have Thunderbolt, they both have a move that's normal, and they both have a high damaging move. One being Sludge with Weezing, and one being Body Slam for Muk. But now we're starting to arrive to the difficult part of the game for Poison types, because now Champ 5 is going to have an Alakazam. and that is going to be fast, and it's going to do double damage, and it's going to crit often. So there's a lot of difficulties that we can foresee ahead. Well, the Champ 5 battle begins, and he starts out with his Pidgeot. We're going to do decent damage with Thunderbolt. We don't take care of it in one hit, but that's alright. Now for Execute, we're going to use Sludge, which also doesn't take care of it in one hit, but that's just fine too. Thunderbolt definitely does not take care of Gyarados either. Meanwhile, Alakazam comes out and has no problem one-hitting me. Meanwhile, we get hit with an onslaught of Alakazam hit after Alakazam hit. I'm going to go ahead and just keep on showing you the footage because it does not get better. Loss after loss after loss. Just a montage of losses until we finally get to this attempt where we finally one-shot Alakazam. Then for Charizard, we managed to take it out thanks to using Rage. Probably thinking, what the heck? Giovanni? He's not next. Well, that's because, well, we got taken out. And it does not get a whole lot better from here. Yes, the first reset was because I forgot to heal. This next reset is mostly just because we do not have good move choices. I actually have to rely on Smokescreen here and Sludge for poison damage because there's just no moves to pick for ground rock types. Even after all of that time wasted on Rhyhorn, the Nidoqueen just takes us out so casually with Body Slam. Normally, these kind of battles are just one-offs, but wow, oh wow, was this extra battle just difficult. Holy crap, I'm losing so much time on Giovanni. I mean, yes, the Alakazam battle on Champ 5 was difficult, but at least it was fast. This one is awful because I make it to Nidoqueen almost every time, but it takes forever because I have to worry about poison damage until I finally take it out. And the pain is going to stop now because we have Blaine next, and if there's anything that Blaine is good for is being an easy win. So we just go ahead and sludge our way through Blaine's team, get to the Rapidash, use another sludge, do half damage, get some poison damage, and then move on to the Arcanine, who's obviously not going to stand a chance to our sludge. Of course, it's doing decent damage, and you know, he uses his customary super potion and then Fire Blast. Oof. I can't make this stuff up, guys. This run is just so bad. Weezing doesn't seem to be able to excel at anything here in the late game, and it's not going to get any better as we now have the Queen of Psychic Pokemon herself next. Luckily, we're able to outspeed Kadabra, nearly take out Mr. Mime, and then, for Venomoth, we actually have a type advantage with Fire Blast. Now for Alakazam, all we have to do is get a crit. Sludge does a decent amount of damage, we survive a Psybeam, but the next Sludge doesn't manage to get us the victory. Nothing's more embarrassing than getting taken out by Psywave. Luckily, the next attempt she uses 2 Psywaves and we get ourselves the win. Now surely, with Fire Blast on our side, Giovanni won't be nearly as difficult as he was last time. So, we go ahead and start off using a few smoke screens so that way we can build up a few badge boosts. However, I forgot that we were so close to a level up, so now the badge boosts are useless, so I go ahead and slowly work our way down on saving my Fire Blast for the more difficult to deal with Pokemon, as Rhyhorn just doesn't deal a lot of damage. Thankfully we don't level up, so we maintain our badge boost for Dugtrio, good to go first and take it out with the Fire Blast. But of course we're going to level up, and now we're going to be facing the Nidoqueen, and as you can probably tell, our Sludge is doing very low amount of damage, and our Fire Blast is not that much better. So now we're between a rock and a hard place as we get taken out. So begins our onslaught of resets as we continue to try and deal as much damage as we can without being taken out by a stronger Pokemon. But of course, that's not going to go well because nothing can go well for Weezing. It's just not working. After a few attempts, we finally managed to get through Nidoqueen with 3 badge boosts, and then we get to Nidoking with 5 Fire Blasts to spare. And I go ahead and try and reduce Nidoking's accuracy as much as possible in order to try and get through with as few attacks as possible. Once we do eventually get through Nidoking, I then realize I made an error. Rhydon is only going to spam Fissure because it thinks it's double effective against us, and therefore I could have used my Fire Blast way earlier in the battle. Luckily, we still get through after a few attempts. Then for Champ 6, I don't predict things will go too well, just because Champ 5 was so incredibly difficult, and our moveset, even though has changed with Fire Blast and Smokescreen, is not going to be all that much better. Our Pokemon is not that much higher of a level where his are, and I can't rely on badge boosts or anything of the like. However, his team is not too bad for Weezing to deal with as long as we can get to the Alakazam and the Charizard. Then for Alakazam, it's really just a crapshoot. The first attempt we get hit by a Psychic, meanwhile on the second attempt things are looking pretty good as we hit it with 2 Sludges before then getting taken down by Psychic. But on this next attempt, things go a little bit more in our favor as we are able to take it down after 3 Sludges, but then this takes us to Charizard with a special drop no less. Luckily, Charizard then decides to use Leer, and our Thunderbolt then decides to crit, and then on top of that, the Leer actually lets us outspeed the Charizard to take it down in the first hit. Weezing has absolutely struggled here in the second half of the game. It's already almost an hour and 10 minutes in, when most Pokemon have already finished by now. We'll figure out why all of these problems exist at the end of this first run, but let's go ahead and continue on with Muk. Now, Muk has got a very similar moveset, but it's just a bit different, as we do have Body Slam and Rest. Plus, again, our high HP is allowing us to tank a lot more attacks, and clearly Weezing was not tanking those attacks very well. However, we still are dealing with the majority of Champ 5's team here real easily, until of course we get to Alakazam, who's every Pokemon's worst nightmare. I wish I could tell you this was a first try victory, but unfortunately it just isn't. We can't tank psychic moves very well. Even though we are able to tank one psychic move, getting there undamaged is not that easy. Plus, the one time we did get there, we took so much damage that Charizard just took us out on the first attack. But eventually we get this try where we only get hit by a Confusion and do what appears to be a high range. So now for Charizard we take an Ember and a Rage and just do not get taken out. And Giovanni wasn't actually an issue for Muk whatsoever. So we move over to Sabrina, who I just figured, since I was able to tank a Psybeam or a Confusion from the Alakazam from Champ, maybe I could take care of Sabrina's Alakazam. After all, I only need to survive one attack. Turns out though, we don't outspeed the first Kadabra, and we're always going to take a hit from that bad boy. Plus, it's not that easy taking care of her second and third Pokemon. I attempt to set up on the Venomoth as much as I can by getting full HP with Rest, but unfortunately we just get hit by either Psybeam or Leech Life a little too much. I actually decided that this was just going to be a fool's errand, so I left and moved on over to Blaine. I'm convinced with enough luck, she probably could have used Reflect and Recover enough times for me to get the victory on Alakazam, but that's just too many resets and I have to worry about the time. Now, for Blaine, I figured Blaine was going to Blaine all over himself, so I didn't really worry about bad move choices or anything, so I didn't really bother to worry about getting hit by Growl or using Rest or setting up or anything of that nature. In fact, even on the second attempt, I still don't worry about it. As you can see, I have a -1 in attack and I still spam Sludge for no reason. After that battle with Blaine, I then moved right back over to Sabrina to see if that extra special is going to make a whole lot of difference or not. Unfortunately, one level was not going to make the difference between outspeeding the Kadabra or not, so we're still going to take damage going into this battle. So even with my best efforts, she's still going to one-hit us with Alakazam. Not once, but twice. But the solution to this problem was actually very simple. I noticed that our speed was actually very close, so I decided to use a rare candy. And then lo and behold, I actually was able to learn Harden, which you guys probably already know by watching all my videos that Harden is a badge boosting move and will increase our stats very much. So now we're going to be able to go into Alakazam without taking any damage whatsoever, and we're going to outspeed. So this battle's going to go from difficult to a joke, just like that. Speaking of jokes, there's another move out there that Muk can learn that Weezing can't, and it makes Giovanni a joke. This move is Mega Drain. I didn't really go over it at the beginning because I wanted those who were actually paying attention to figure it out on their own, but Mega Drain is another move that allows Muk to have some extra coverage. Seeing as we don't actually have any coverage whatsoever for rock ground types, Mega Drain is a godsend. It makes battles go from using Sludge over and over again to maybe using Fire Blast to now just being able to not have to worry about them whatsoever. Don't get me wrong, 40 base power is not that much, but when you're using only moves that get resisted by the opponent, it's a major upgrade. And thanks to Body Slam, I actually don't even need Sludge anymore, so that's the move I teach it over. It's very funny if you think about it, because the best move that Muk is able to learn actually doesn't even need to be used towards the endgame, because there are no grass or bug types in the Elite Four to have to worry about, so Body Slam is just so much better for every situation. Things don't change much for Champ 6 either. As we take down Pidgeot and move on to Rhyhorn, you can start to see that I'm going to start setting up with Harden, and this is going to give me a big advantage because I'm not going to lose any HP thanks to getting all my HP back with Mega Drain, and now I'm going to outspeed and do massive damage to all of his Pokemon, including the Alakazam. So oddly enough, in the last several Versus videos, the badge boosting move didn't really give us that much of an advantage. However, in this matchup, it's giving us so much of an advantage that it's not even close to a challenge. Now that we've reached the same point with both of our competitors, let's go ahead and take a look at those splits. As you can see, Muk has finally started to pull ahead by a large margin. Even though the reset counter is not that terribly far behind, you can already forecast just how Weezing is going to struggle here in the late game. All of our problems are going to be solvable thanks to Harden, Body Slam, even Mega Drain. Whereas Weezing is now going to struggle a whole lot. But who knows, maybe, just maybe, the higher special might give Weezing an advantage that I'm not foreseeing. But 8 minutes is pretty far to make up. But who knows, maybe the second run will go a lot better. As Lorelei then begins, we go ahead and set up with our first sets of Harden. With our Harden set up, our Thunderbolt then does not knock it out. We have to use 2 more Thunderbolts to get through Dugong. While fully set up, we should easily be able to get through Cloyster, and then Slowbro, although Slowbro's a little bit more tanky, although it may have survived mainly due to that crit. And then for Jinx, we're going to go ahead and use a physical move like Body Slam. Unfortunately, we did level up on the Slowbro, and then we're outsped by the Jinx. Then for Lapras, we're going to take big damage thanks to Blizzard, although now we can't be frozen, but Lapras moves 3 times and takes us out. On the next attempt, we don't get paralyzed going into Lapras, but I find out that Mega Drain does not do a whole lot of damage, so I switch back to Thunderbolt, but by then, it's already too late. On the next attempt, I used a rare candy so that way I level up after the Jinx instead of during the Jinx, so that way I can get through with more HP to spare. Then for the Black Belt, things are extremely easy as we're able to just get through his entire team using only Mega Drain and Thunderbolt. The question is, do I even bother to set up? And the answer is no. I do not need Harden for this battle, I have plenty of HP to spare. Then, as we move on to Agatha, there's a dark realization that's about to be had. I don't have a good move. I stare there for quite some time, realizing that Thunderbolt is not going to be good enough to compete with her Pokemon. Yes, 95 damage is a lot, but her special is incredibly high. But Body Slam won't do any damage and Mega Drain will do next to nothing, so I really have no other choice but to use Thunderbolts. In fact, there's a chance I could even run out of Thunderbolts. On this first attempt, I don't bother to set up any Hardens and I realize that my damage output is just too low. But that first attempt was actually very lucky because on the next several attempts, I don't really make it too far into the Agatha battle, therefore not allowing me to even bother trying out different strategies like using 3 Hardens, 4 Hardens, 5 Hardens. No, I don't get the opportunity. I get put to sleep and hit with Dream Eater just too many times. But after 6 attempts, things go a little bit differently. I'm still not doing much damage here with Thunderbolt. I don't bother setting up Hardens at all, but she switches into Golbat early, which allows me to take it out with a Body Slam, followed by Gengar, which now I get a free attack in thanks to Thunderbolt, and don't get confused. As Haunter comes out, I decide that this is a great place to start using my Hardens. However, when she switches into Arbok, I realize this is a fantastic time to use my Hardens because she just can't do anything with Arbok to us. So now that I'm fully set up, I can take down Arbok, move over to Haunter, use Thunderbolt, which now does half, which is pretty darn good, which then puts me in great shape so I can go ahead and take the Haunter down on the next hit, followed by the Gengar, who just decides to only use Dream Eater, allowing me to get a surprisingly easy and lucky victory. Now, Muk didn't really have too many problems there at the beginning of the league, just having a few resets on Lorelei and a handful of resets there on Agatha, which, honestly, if you saw its moveset and you saw the situation that we were put in, is probably pretty good. Let's go ahead and take a look at Weezing, who I'm not foreseeing to go very well. Alright, to start Lorelei, she uses her usual Dugong and we go for Thunderbolt. Alright, not too bad. Damage is pretty decent considering we have a higher special. Then, for Cloyster, Thunderbolt also takes it out, but that's probably because of a crit. Then, Slowbro, looks like a 2-hit. Amnesia, that's alright, it's only going to spam Amnesia because it's a psychic move. Then for Jinx, we unfortunately do not outspeed, which is going to be bad because we're going to take a hit every single time. Then we do decent damage with Thunderbolt as Hydro Pump then misses, but Blizzard then takes us out. Unfortunately, even with a Hydro Pump miss and pretty decent crit luck, we could not get past Lapras. So I then begin our onslaught of losses as I continue to try out Smokescreen because she uses inaccurate moves, therefore giving me opportunities to hopefully win. Unfortunately, it just doesn't work out. Few resets later, we finally get a try where things can seem to go just a little bit our way as we go ahead and get a crit Thunderbolt followed by her spamming Confuse Ray until we can finally get the win. There's no way we can rely on that strategy going forward. Thankfully, we have the Black Belt next, and only difference between this one is that we're using Fire Blast instead of Mega Drain, so it's going to be a 2-hit on the Onyxes instead. Thunderbolt is just going to be solid enough to take down the Hitmonchan, Hitmonlee, and Machamp. But the real big bad of this run is going to be Agatha, for the same reasons that Muk had problem, that, well, we don't have Harden to work with this time, so we're going to have to rely on Smokescreen, Fire Blast, and Thunderbolt. Or, God forbid, Sludge, but Sludge is only going to do sludge damage, it's not going to be able to poison. But Agatha is tricky. Smokescreen is not actually going to stick because she swaps out her Pokemon too frequently for me to be able to even bother considering using it. On this first attempt, I try, but it just doesn't work out. Then, I spend the next several attempts trying to figure out which moves are going to be the best, as Fire Blast, Thunderbolt, and Sludge all do varying amounts of damage. As I eventually figure out that I'm not doing very much damage at all, I eventually teach Mimic, so that way I can consider putting them to sleep and doing damage, which is a slightly better strategy, but obviously you can tell it's not going that well, as we've had Mimic for quite some time and still get taken out, time after time. Eventually we get to this attempt where she swaps out on turn 1, so I have to steal Confuse Ray, which as you can see has already got the missing Golbat glitch because Mimic on a Pokemon that was not supposed to be out causes some problems in the game. Luckily, on this attempt we're able to confuse the Gengar, then it manages to get through confusion and confuse us, which eventually causes us to hit ourselves. But now things are going a little bit better as our Thunderbolts keep on hitting and our Hypnosis doesn't. As we get to Haunter, are able to confuse it, it hits itself, so now we've already got an extra free turn and managed to get a crit, which allows us to then use Fire Blast and burn Haunter, allowing us to take it out in the next attack. Followed by Arbok, who we then set to Confusion, use a Fire Blast, does decent damage, and then swap over to Thunderbolt to conserve on Fire Blast PP. Followed by the final Gengar, who we then use Fire Blast on and does decent amount of damage as she just uses a bad Dream Eater that does nothing, allowing us to eventually not get confused and take her out. It looked like it wasn't too bad, but you gotta remember just how many resets were there. So once all things are tallied up, you can tell that we've taken quite an amount of resets. Now if you take a look at our splits, you can see that the resets have started to pull quite away with Weezing, and our time behind has pulled even further back, which I don't see getting any better because the champion battle is going to be difficult for Weezing, and it's only going to take figuring out which level to be for Muk. But at least one thing is certain, Lance is going to be a very easy battle. I've got a 4 times effective Thunderbolt for Gyarados. The Dragonairs and Dragonite are only going to spam Agility because of its Psychic typing. Thanks, good AI. And then for Aerodactyl, well, that's the only one we need to worry about, but because of our high defense, I really don't see it taking us out in one hit. But the Champion, on the other hand, is going to be a very different story. Yes, we do have a move that'll deal with Pidgeot, so I'm not really worried about that matchup. However, once we get to Alakazam, things take a bit of a turn because we don't have a good move, and there is no good move to use. So we have to spam Sludge and just cross our fingers, which doesn't happen on the first try. Nor does it happen on the second try. In fact, it doesn't happen on the next several tries, and this is because Sludge is just not that powerful of a move to use against Alakazam. Ironically, the move that we want him to use is the move that will actually make it take longer for us to win. We want him to use Reflect, which will allow us to actually get a hit in, But then, after he uses Reflect, we need him to actually use Reflect 2 times in a row. Or we can try and get a rogue crit, which is even less likely since we have a low amount of speed. But eventually, a try like this happens where we get a special drop, followed by him then using a full restore, and then we get a crit, allowing us to take ourselves over to Rhydon, which I froze for a minute because I just didn't know what to do, so I went with Fire Blast. But then he used Fury Attack, and because of my low amount of HP, I was done. But 2 tries later, we get another attempt where we get to take down the Alakazam because we get hit by a Psybeam followed by him using Reflect, allowing us to get some extra damage in. So I go for our tried and true Fire Blast, but obviously it's not doing a whole lot of damage, and I just have no other better move to use if you take a look at our moves. So I just do what I can, and we get by Rhydon. But then the Executor is going to easily take us out, so I have no choice but to use Hypnosis, but unfortunately we get set to sleep and taken out. But certainly, one of these tries are going to succeed eventually. The next try, we actually get past the Alakazam once again, thanks to a Reflect. But, as you can see, we're at low HP, and I have to do something. But, unfortunately, there's just nothing left to do. Mimic doesn't really give me a whole lot of good options, and we get taken out once again. But on the very next attempt, we finally take out the Alakazam because he uses Reflect twice, allowing us to go into Rhydon with a lot of HP. We get the burn on Rhydon, which I believe is a 50% chance of happening, so Rhydon's going to do even less damage, and he increases our stats thanks to a Leer, so we have every opportunity to win this. Unfortunately, Executor then puts us to sleep, but we wake up immediately, hit it with a Fire Blast, and then the next Fire Blast then finishes it off, taking us to Gyarados, who we then promptly take out with a Thunderbolt thanks to a crit, followed by the Charizard, who we make it to for the first time, and it locks itself into Rage, which allows us to get the win. Boy, that was terrible. I don't know about you guys, but 59 resets is ungodly. But now we need to go ahead and finish up with Muk, so we can get to the analysis portion of the game. Once again, Lance isn't going to be an issue, we're just going to Thunderbolt the Gyarados, then it survives. Okay, well, that's our lower special in action. But anyways, after that, we're going to go ahead and set up on the Dragonairs, who of course aren't going to be able to do anything to us. The reason I'm setting up and not just rolling right through the rest of the team is for a few reasons, but mainly because I want to be able to take down the Dragonite without taking too many attacks, because if you take a long enough amount of time, Dragonite will use Barrier and Agility, so to outspeed you, and it'll have so much defense that you're not doing very much damage to it at all. And he uses a Hyper Potion that usually prolongs the battle so long that it gets really annoying and very time consuming. Luckily, we never leveled up, and it was actually a very easy battle. This brings us to the champion, who should hopefully go pretty well if things are played out right. We use all of our rare candies, then we start with the Pidgeot, as we're going to go ahead and set up. I don't know why I did that first Thunderbolt, but now that I'm in the right set of mind, getting ready to set up, there's not much he can do to prevent me from outspeeding and hopefully sweeping his team. The only thing I can really see screwing this up is if we miss a move, which is unlikely since we have all 100% accurate moves, or if we level up, which also seems quite likely after seeing how much XP we gained from that last battle. Of course, there's always falling to sleep to the Executor and getting pinged to death, which doesn't seem likely since we have so much defense thanks to Harden. We're going to go ahead and take down Gyarados, but now we've leveled up. So, let's go ahead and see what happens. We're going to use our Thunderbolt. Alright, we get caught in a Fire Spin, which then takes a little bit of extra time. He uses Rage, we use Thunderbolt, but because he's locked into Rage, we've got no choice but to win. But boy, if he had used Fire Blast, we could have been in for quite a problem. But he didn't, and we win. Muk then finishes the game at level 59 with 114 real time, 409 game time, and 23 resets, while Weezing finishes the game at level 60 with 139 real time, 414 game time, and 59 resets. When we take a look at the splits, it's very obvious to me that both of the Pokemon are very similar up until a point. That point being Koga. After Koga, things get quite a bit difficult as Weezing is not able to deal with all the late game threats the way Muk can. Muk then gets Body Slam, which allows it to replace Sludge later on, while Weezing has to continue relying on the outdated move. Well, I think the big kicker of the run is that Weezing has to rely on all of its strengths, while Muk is able to use up the rest of its deficiencies thanks to the Badge Boost glitch on Harden. But to be fair, I chose not to use Minimize. So there's quite a bit of room for improvement for Muk. I'm not sure how much room for improvement, but a lot of those resets can just be changed by missing. So I can actually probably finish the game at a lower level instead, where it'll save me a lot of extra time. While Weezing, there just isn't a lot of room for improvement. The only thing I can think of doing is actually just finishing the game at a significantly higher level, so that way it can outspeed or at least two-shot some of the more difficult battles. I did think of one more improvement, but I'm going to go ahead and save that for you to see during the run. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start our second run. We then name Muk Buddy, because, well, he just needs a buddy. And Weezing, we name him Boom, because he likes to go boom. First champ battle is a very simple one, no issues here. Then for Brock, we figured out in the first run that you only need to be level 13 for Muk and level 14 for Weezing, and then the strategy is basically the same. We're just going to use our attacks until both Pokemon eventually get poisoned, and then the poison is going to whittle them down until we get the victory. Now, of course, Muk runs into a few issues there on the first try, but nothing that takes more than one try. Then, for Champ 2, things are still pretty easy, although Muk does have some difficulties because it gets hit by an early sand attack, and in fact, it gets hit by too many sand attacks and therefore causes it to get one reset. However, you'll have noticed that Weezing's time is just a little bit longer at the beginning of this battle, and that's because I've had to battle some extra trainers and some extra wild Pokemon to make sure that I can keep up. Then, for Misty, things are actually going a bit smoother, thanks to the higher levels. As you can tell, I actually went the extra training route for both of our Pokemon here. And I decided to switch strategies with Muk and poison Misty's Pokemon since Pound is so much weaker than Sludge. Then, for Surge, you can actually tell that Weezing here, even though I've done a lot of extra training, does not have that much further of time, and that's mostly just because I'm not losing any battles and wasting time. However, after Surge, Weezing ran into some issues with the exploding hiker over in Rock Tunnel, and this is because I didn't pick up Rest. Honestly, I'm not sure why I didn't pick up Rest. It would have been an improvement, either Tackle or Smog, but I did think of this strategy for Muk, and I filmed Muk after Weezing, so hindsight is only 20/20 here. But we only lost one reset, so it's not that big of a deal. Erika is still the freebie that you would expect. However, take a look at the Muk matchup here. Now, Muk gets hit by Wrap on Victory Bell, Constrict on Tangela, and Sleep Powder on Vileplume. So this battle literally takes almost twice as long just because of those three moves, whereas Weezing didn't have these issues. Then, post Erika, I make sure to grab 4 Carbos for Muk and skip grabbing vitamins altogether for Weezing. More on that later. Then, after we skip Champ 4, we can then move on to Koga's gym, where Muk then runs into issues with the 3 drowsy Kadabra trainer. This can mostly be chalked up to Muk's inability to one-shot all of his Pokemon, and their ability to do massive damage. Now, for Koga, Muk has learned Minimize, and because this is the second run, I'm going to keep this move and show you Muk's absolute potential for beating the game. Because of this potential though, I do have to spend the majority of the beginning of the battle setting up all of the minimizes. But now, even if we do level up after that first coughing, we're most likely not going to get hit for the rest of the battle. Meanwhile, Weezing has already won, but Muk is not far behind, because it's just going to be able to beat this one slow and steady and not get hit through the rest of the way. Now, for Champ 5, you're going to see an enormous level difference. Again, I'm telling you, I'm making sure that when we get to the champion, we are going to win, and hopefully less than 10 attempts, because I want Weezing to have a good time. Unfortunately, we get hit by a critical hit on the Alakazam and have to take a reset. However, on the next attempt, things go quite a bit better for Weezing. Now, as you can probably see, this battle for Muk is actually going quite slow, and by the time we actually make it back to Alakazam, Muk is just getting there for the first time. Of course, we get hit by another critical hit Psybeam from Alakazam, but luckily Charizard just uses a potion. And then, for Blaine, we have very similar strategies, but in the wrong directions. Muk is using Minimize to increase its evasion, and Weezing is going to use Smokescreen on Arcanine to make sure that it doesn't get hit by Fire Blast. Both of them have the same results, as they both get first try victories. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put in the Giovanni battle here, so that way you can see Weezing's redemption arc, and also I can mention that I saved a ton of time on both runs. For Muk, I saved a lot of time not floundering about with Sabrina and getting a few resets, and for Weezing, I saved a lot of time not having to battle Giovanni over and over again as I went and picked up Fire Blast off of Blaine. Then, for Sabrina, Muk ended up having some issues taking a massive psychic attack while taking down Kadabra, and while setting up Minimize, Mr. Mime ended up taking it down. Meanwhile, Weezing was able to finish off Alakazam after it only used a Psybeam and a Reflect. Then, for the Giovanni gym battle, things actually go quite simple for both of our competitors. However, for Muk, things were extremely simple as we just use Minimize and nothing else happens afterwards, while Dugtrio then does a lot of damage to Muk, and after we eventually take down the Dugtrio after taking 2 massive damages from Dig, we're then able to get through the rest of the team pretty luckily, I might add, thanks to me using some smokescreen and getting a bit of lucky misses on the rest of the team. Now, time for the thing I've been alluding to the entire game. The secret weapon to being able to beat the game with Weezing is Substitute. Now, I've been saving up all the money that I've gotten throughout the entire game, picking up some extra nuggets and extra TMs to sell, and now I'm able to finally buy Substitute. Now, don't get me wrong, this move comes at a big cost. A lot of time. As you can see from the timer, it's nearly 3.5 to 4 minutes after you count flying and moving around. Then for Champ 6, knowing that this is probably the most difficult battle in the entire game for Weezing, I made sure to use all of my rare candies, so now you see there's an enormous level difference between our two competitors, and this is obviously because of the rare candies. Now, one of the benefits to using all these rare candies is now all of our damage ranges are pretty darn good, and our speed has increased so much to the point where we now actually outspeed the Alakazam and can take it out. And even though we take large amount of damage from the Charizard, our Substitute can take the damage for us, and even if it does crit, then we don't actually lose. And for Lorelei, to nobody's surprise, these moves are actually making quite a big difference. For Muk, Minimize is going to make it so her Pokemon are either not going to hit her or do very little damage. And then for Weezing, nothing has really changed, but the increase in level is allowing us to get even better ranges on all of our Pokemon, allowing us to 2 or 3 shot almost all of them, and we don't even lose the Substitute across the entire battle. As far as the Black Belt is concerned, nothing was really an issue going on in the first time through, and honestly nothing really changes this time through. Although, for Muk, I do take safety precautions and use Minimize, even though I really don't need to, only because on the Onixes I'm forced to use either Body Slam or Sludge, which does very little damage. Other than that, it was a piece of cake all the way through. Now, for Agatha, Muk has no issues because it can just use Minimize and then nothing's going to hit it ever since. However, for Weezing, things change a little bit, as now we have Substitute. Substitute isn't the perfect catch-all for everything, but when we use a Substitute, we take less damage than we do from Nightshade, but Substitute allows us not to fall asleep. However, we still can get confused or paralyzed, so it's not perfect. Unfortunately, on the first try, things don't go perfectly for Weezing as we get taken out. However, on the second try, things go a lot better as we're able to then take down the Gengar after running out of Fire Blast and have to switch to a last Thunderbolt and fight through confusion for the win. Lance wasn't an issue the first time around and wasn't an issue this time around. However, if you take a look at our splits, boy do we save a lot of time on Agatha for both of our competitors. Agatha is a real chore, and those extra levels really do help. Now, the champion battle is where we're going to see the biggest amounts of change. For Muk, nothing's really going to change, everything's going to miss. Minimize is such a great move. However, for Weezing, we are using Substitute, and Substitute definitely helps us hold on and take extra damage away from Alakazam, but it does use Reflect twice, so it doesn't prevent a whole lot. But then, we get to move on, and for Rhydon, we just get to set up another Substitute and start using some Fire Blast. Turns out, even with extra levels, didn't make the move any more extra accurate, so after a handful of Fire Blast misses, our Substitute breaks. We're obviously going to need to set up another Substitute before then using another Fire Blast. All this time where Rhydon is using Fury Attack, just wasting time. But eventually we do get through Rhydon and move on to Exeggutor. And because we have the Substitute up, we shouldn't be able to get set to sleep, or at least so I thought. Anyways, we got set to sleep, and now is going to suck, because we're just going to get hit by Barrage until we eventually faint. I guess I didn't know Substitute nearly as well as I thought I did. And now we get taken out and we have to move on to the next attempt, where things go a little bit better as we're able to take out the Executor with 1 critical hit Fire Blast, and then taking out Gyarados with 1 critical hit Thunderbolt, keeping our substitute maintained for Charizard, where we use a Thunderbolt and take it out with 1 critical hit. Wow, how lucky. So, we finished the game with Muk at level 61 with 1 hour real time, 353 game time, and 4 resets, as well as finished the game with Weezing at level 69 with 121 real time, 518 game time, and 4 resets. If we take a look at the splits, you'll have noticed that we've gained a lot of time, but unfortunately, it still wasn't nearly enough to keep up with a normal Pokemon like Muk. I really did my best at trying to get Weezing to a better time. I nearly cut off 55 resets and it still wasn't enough. But on the bright side, we got to see just how different the Pokemon runs will be with different moves, different strategies, and different playstyles at different levels. So without further ado, it's time to give Muk his crown and congratulate the creepy slime monster. Now let's go ahead and compare the splits between the 2 runs themselves on each Pokemon. At first glance, you can definitely tell that we gained time on both competitors for Brock. And this is because we knew what level to go into Brock at. Then both competitors ended up losing a whole lot of time all the way up until Koga. And it's clear that this is all the extra training that I did to make sure that I had more levels for the late game. Then for Muk, we incrementally gained time throughout the rest of the game, and this is because we had Minimize. Then for Weezing, we actually go up and down in time quite a lot. This is mostly due to all the extra training, and between Giovanni and Champ 6, we actually went and picked up Substitute, which you can see cost us a lot of extra time. But what you do get to see after that is we save ourselves loads and loads of resets, and lots of time, because of that extra time wasted. Anytime there's a big improvement like these two, I'm always happy, so I think I did a pretty good job. As for the rankings, both Pokemon did very badly against Brock, and this is going to hurt their final times and their ranking positions. Weepinbell played pretty smooth, and it only had resets in the places that it really needed resets, which is very similar to how Muk had performed. 104 is basically peak Electabuzz, requiring a lot of luck at the exploding hiker, and some more luck throughout the rest of the run. And if you combine real time, that makes a pretty good spot. Then for Weezing, I contemplated making it last. It was really bad, and I mean really bad, but after Substitute, it did okay. So, well, Kabuto struggled, and nothing was going to make Kabuto any better. So, right before Kabuto seems like the right spot. Thanks to a poll that I ran on my community tab earlier last week, I'm going to be doing Pokemon Blue with Metronome only next. Since this content's going to be a little bit different than the normal content I have on the channel, I just want to make sure that you guys know that I'm going to be doing this challenge with a full team, and I'm going to be doing it live. If you want to know when, make sure to pay attention to my community tab. I'm going to try and post daily. I predict this challenge is going to be a really fun one. I'm going to be using both a mixture of Clefairy and Clefable. Since there's only 5 Moonstones in the game, I'm actually going to start the game with Clefable. This is going to help the challenge get started because Brock is going to be the ultimate first gym leader, and it will allow me to have a full team of 6 Pokemon going into the league. I'm also going to use Game Hook to get rid of all the non-Metronome moves, so that way I can actually use Struggle if I run out of Metronome. And I know Struggle isn't part of Metronome only, but Metronome only has 10 PP, so I am going to have to do a fair bit of struggling during the run. Big thanks to my 2 Patreons, Malfever and Speedrunner0218. If you like this kind of content and you're curious how Kadabra would fare against Mr. Mime, make sure to check out the video in the top right.